You want to know what $52,000 looks like when you've just been turned down for 180? It looks like a black pickup truck sitting in your neighbor's driveway with a bow on the hood. That's what it looked like to me on a Thursday afternoon in October, standing in my kitchen in Guelph, Ontario, with a bag of rationed medication on the counter, and a son who'd told me that morning that things were too tight this month. My name is Stuart Mackay. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a licensed electrician with the local utility company, pulled wire through every kind of wall in every kind of weather this province can throw at a man, and I retired 5 years ago with a decent pension, a house on Willow Road I've owned since 1991, and two hands that still know how to do something useful. I raised one son in that house, Ryan, 41 years old now, works in commercial real estate in Kitchener, drives a nice car, coaches his daughter's soccer team on weekends. I was proud of the man he became. I'm still working out what I am now. 6 weeks before all of this, I had my left hip replaced at Guelph General. The surgeon said the joint had worn down the way old hinges do, gradually, until one day they just stop working right, and you wonder how you didn't notice sooner. Recovery was going the way it was supposed to. Slow, frustrating, but going. The problem was the prescription. Ontario's drug benefit plan covers most things once you're 65, but my orthopedic surgeon had prescribed a specific anti-inflammatory and blood thinner combination. A brand name formulation that wasn't on the provincial formulary. My supplemental coverage from my old union plan had lapsed the year I retired. Gap coverage, they call it. A gap just wide enough to cost me $180 out of pocket until the insurance appeal cleared, which my pharmacist estimated at 7 to 10 business days. 7 to 10 days, that's all it was. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't broke. My CPP landed on the last Friday of every month without fail. I had savings. I had this house, which had appreciated considerably since 1991. But I couldn't drive yet. Hip won't allow it. And John had taken the car that morning to her sister's place in Cambridge and wouldn't be back until late. I'd already stretched my last refill further than my pharmacist recommended. I needed those pills that afternoon. So I did what any father does. I called Ryan. Hey, it's Dad. Quick favor. Could you swing by the Shoppers on Stone Road and grab my prescription? It's $180. I'll e-transfer you the second I'm off the phone. Yeah, of course, Dad, he said it fast. The way you say something when you're already composing the next sentence in your head. Actually, can I call you back? I'm heading into a meeting. I said sure. I said I wasn't in a rush. That was the first time I let something slide past me that I should have caught. He called back 40 minutes later. Dad, look, this month is just brutal. The mortgage went up with the rate renewal, Trisha's car needed brakes, the kids' skating registration just came out. I hate to do this, but can it wait until Friday? Your CPP lands Friday, right? 2 days. 2 days. I had 3 tablets left in the bottle. I want to tell you I pushed back. I didn't. I said, of course, son, don't worry about it. I said it the way I've said everything uncomfortable in this family for 40 years. Quietly, pleasantly, meaning none of it. He hung up. I stood in my kitchen looking out the window at Willow Road. And that's when I noticed the flatbed. A transport truck had parked directly across the street in front of Miles Corbett's house. Miles is Trisha's father. Retired plumbing supply distributor, 71 years old, widower, lives alone in the house he and his wife bought in the early 80s. I've known the man for 15 years. We've had coffee more times than I can count. We've argued about the Leafs. He's a decent man. The flatbed lowered its ramp, and down that ramp came a brand new pickup, black Silverado, 4-door, chrome trim catching the October sun like it was trying to announce itself to the entire street. Ryan's car was parked behind the flatbed. I watched my son walk around that truck with a set of keys in his hand, talking and gesturing the way he does when he's excited about something. Miles came down his front steps. I watched Ryan hold out those keys the way a man presents something he's been waiting to present for a long time. Miles took them slowly, looked at them, looked at the truck, and his face wore the expression of a man who doesn't quite know what to do with something this large. Trisha stood to the side with her phone out, filming. I let the curtain fall back into place. Jean wasn't home yet. Good. I needed a few minutes before I had any kind of conversation with another person. I sat in my armchair in the front room, and I did the kind of arithmetic you do when you're not quite ready to face what the numbers mean. $180. Told no that morning, 52,000, easy, probably more once you added tax and the dealer freight charge. Delivered that same afternoon, same sun, same wallet, same week. I didn't say anything, I didn't touch anything. The house was very quiet, and I let the quiet be what it was. When Jean came home around 7, she walked through the door mid-sentence about something her sister had said, looked at my face and stopped. Stuart, what is it? I told her about the prescription first. Then I told her about the truck. She sat down across from me and said nothing for a while. Jean is not a woman who loses her composure easily. 40 years of marriage will show you things about a person that courtship never could. And one thing I know about my wife is that she processes difficult information the way she tackles a complicated recipe. Carefully, thoroughly, without skipping steps. How much? She asked. 52,000 minimum, might be more. She looked toward the window, toward the dark where Miles' driveway sat. Stuart, she said finally, sleep on it before you do anything. That's my wife. That's what 40 years looks like. I went to bed when she did. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling fan and thought about a lot of things. I thought about the summer I taught Ryan how to wire a light switch in the garage. How proud he'd been when the lights came on. I thought about the hockey bag I'd carried to 100 cold rinks on 100 early Saturday mornings without being asked once. I thought about what it meant that the man who couldn't spare $180 had apparently found 52,000 somewhere. I got up around midnight, went to the kitchen. I have a small notepad in the junk drawer that I've kept since before I retired, the kind with grid lines, the sort I used to log job hours in. I wrote the date, October the 9th, underneath it, prescription, $180. Ryan said no. Truck delivered to Miles across the street, same day. I put the notepad back and went to bed. I didn't yet know what I was building toward. I only knew I wasn't going to let the number disappear. Here's the thing about being the quiet one in a family. People assume quiet means fine. They assume that because you don't escalate, you're not keeping score. My son had made that assumption. He'd been making it for years. He called 3 times that week, not once to ask about my hip, not once to ask whether I'd sorted the prescription. He called to talk about my house, specifically about what I was planning to do with it as I got on in years. His words. At 67, apparently I was getting on in years. Dad, you should really think about simplifying. A man in your position, in that house alone all day while Jean's out, have you and I ever talked about a joint ownership arrangement? Just practical. Makes things easier if something ever happens. Joint ownership, on a house I'd owned outright for 11 years. I said, that sounds like something to think about, Ryan. He heard agreement. I meant none of it. What he didn't know was that something else had started. Something I hadn't planned, and that came from a direction I never would have anticipated. Miles knocked on my door on a Tuesday morning, 12 days after the truck delivery. He was holding a manila envelope. He didn't look like a man who'd come to say thank you. Stuart, he didn't come in. He stood on the step and held the envelope out. I think you need to see this before Ryan comes by this weekend. I took it. Miles, what is this? He looked past me for a moment, the way a man looks when he's been sitting with something uncomfortable for too long and has finally decided to say it. Tricia mentioned something to her brother at Thanksgiving. He works in commercial lending. He called me Sunday. Apparently, when Ryan applied for the financing on the truck, he listed your home address as secondary security and told the lender you'd verbally agreed to a co-ownership arrangement on the property. The bank sent a verification letter to your house. He paused. Did you receive anything unusual in the mail these past few weeks? I looked at him. Ryan picks up the mail when he stops by, I said. He grabs it off the mat if I can't get to the door fast enough. The words came out very level, which surprised me. Miles nodded once, slowly. I called the dealership Monday morning, he said. I'm returning the truck. I've put that in writing. Whatever's in the envelope is the paperwork trail Tricia's brother pulled together. I thought you should know what you're dealing with before you decide what to do about it. He looked me in the eye. A man's father should come first. That's all I've got to say about it. He walked back down my front steps without another word. I stood at the door with the envelope in both hands and listened to the October wind moving through the maples, and I thought, there it is. The thing underneath the thing. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. Jean was at her book club. I had the house to myself, I opened the envelope the way I used to open a contractor's bid, slowly, looking for the clause on the back page that changes everything on the front. The loan application listed my home address as collateral backing, in a handwritten margin note to the processor. Secondary guarantor has verbally confirmed co-ownership arrangement, formal paperwork to follow. Verbal confirmation that I had never given. There are moments when the thing you were almost willing to forgive becomes the thing you cannot. I had been close, very close, to writing off the truck as insecurity, as a son trying too hard to belong in his wife's family. But this was different. This was Ryan deciding that my house, my 31 years of work, my retirement, was something he could quietly borrow against without asking. He had counted on me being the man who always said, of course, don't worry about it. He had miscounted. Jean read the papers when she got home. I watched her face go through several things on the way to stillness. Stuart, she said, what are you going to do? I'm going to call a lawyer in the morning. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. She didn't say don't make a scene. She didn't say think about the grandchildren. She said good. 40 years. Sometimes a marriage is just someone knowing exactly when to say that one word. The lawyer's office was in downtown Guelph, real oak doors, waiting room that smells like old paper. I sat with a woman who'd spent 20 years in estate and fraud law, and she walked me through what Ryan's loan application represented, a misrepresentation of fact to a federally regulated lender. Depending on how the bank chose to treat it, it could rise to fraud. At minimum, once the discrepancy was documented and on file, the loan would be flagged for immediate review. She also helped me execute something I should have done years earlier. A formal family trust covering the house and my retirement assets. Clean, properly documented, correctly administered. My name on it, Jean's name on it, my accountant copied in. Ryan's name appeared nowhere in it, not as executor, not as beneficiary, until and unless I decided otherwise. 3 weeks later, Ryan and Tricia came for Sunday dinner. Jean made her shepherd's pie, the one with sharp cheddar on top that Ryan has been requesting since he was 12 years old. I let the meal be normal. I let Ryan tell me about a deal he was working on. I let Tricia compliment the dining room. I let everyone get comfortable. When the plates were cleared, I put a folder on the table. You wanted to talk about the house, I said. Let's talk. Ryan leaned forward. The look on his face was the look of a man who thinks he's finally getting something he's been waiting for. I opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, I formalized a trust structure covering this property and all my retirement accounts. It's administered by a licensed fiduciary. You are not named in it. That is not an oversight. The look changed. I also want you to know that I've seen the loan application for the truck, the one that lists this house as collateral security, based on a verbal co-ownership agreement you told the lender I'd confirmed. I kept my voice level. There was no reason to raise it. I never confirmed that. You used my name, my address, and my property to secure financing without my knowledge. And in the same week you did that, you told me you couldn't spare $180 for my medication. Ryan started to say something about stress, about the loan just needing to go through, about how he'd meant to talk to me about the co-ownership idea anyway, and things had moved faster than... I understand why you bought that truck, I said. I understand what it costs a man to feel like he has to prove something to a room he thinks he doesn't belong in. I've seen that pressure on you for years. But Ryan, I looked at my son, really looked at him. Your father's house is not a resource you borrow against without asking. And your father is not a man you say no to on a Tuesday and walk past on a Thursday with a $52,000 set of keys in your pocket. Miles had spoken to Tricia before the dinner. I don't know exactly what passed between them. But she sat at my table that evening and did not defend the loan. She looked at her husband with an expression I recognized, the expression of a person discovering something about the man across from her that she wishes she'd known sooner. Ryan stood up. His voice had a shake in it I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. So you're cutting me out. Over $180. I'm not cutting you out, I said. I'm stopping a pattern. There's a difference. I looked at my son. You're a grown man. I built this life with my own hands. The same hands that taught you how to do anything worth doing. This house is not a backup plan for mistakes you haven't told me about. And I am not a soft place to fall when every other option is used up. He left without finishing his coffee. He didn't slam the door. People don't have the energy for that kind of exit, once they've run out of ground to stand on. Tricia stayed another 20 minutes. She apologized, which I hadn't expected. I told her the apology I needed wasn't hers to give. The bank received Miles's written refusal of the vehicle title the following week. The loan application discrepancy was flagged. The truck was retrieved by the dealer. Ryan spent the better part of a month in conversation with the bank's compliance department. Exactly the kind of conversation you end up in when a number doesn't add up the way you told someone it would. He called 6 times in the weeks that followed. I let most of them go to voicemail. The message was always some version of the same thing, that I'd overreacted, that this could all be fixed, that I was making things harder than they needed to be. The 7th time I picked up. Dad, a long pause, I need you to know I'm sorry. I waited. I should have just gone and picked up your prescription, he said. I should have done it without making it a conversation. I knew I'd overshot. I didn't want you to see it. That's not an excuse. I know it isn't. His voice was quieter than I'd heard it in years. And the loan thing, I know how it looks. I know what I did. I said, I know you do, Ryan. Is there a way back from this? I looked out the kitchen window at Willow Road. November by then, the leaves completely gone, that particular gray settling in over Guelph the way it always does. Slow, patient, total. Yes, I said, but it's a long road and you're the one who has to walk it. He didn't say anything for a moment. I know, he said. We didn't fix anything that day. I hadn't expected to. Trust doesn't rebuild the way a conversation ends. It rebuilds the way you build anything that has to last. Slowly, deliberately, one honest thing at a time. That's not a principle I learned in a book. That's 31 years of working with my hands, and the understanding that something done right takes exactly as long as it takes. 6 months later, I'm in my garage on a Saturday afternoon, refinishing an old cedar chest that's been sitting in storage since Jean's mother passed. Good wood. It just needed someone to pay proper attention to it. Jean comes to the garage door and tells me Ryan called. He wants to bring the grandkids by for a visit next weekend. He's been steady, she says, which is her careful way of describing something we both understand. I keep sanding. What do you think? She asks. I think about that for a while. The cedar dust on my hands, the grain coming up clean under the paper. Tell him Sunday afternoon, I say, and tell him to come empty-handed. She smiles and goes back inside. I look out at the November sky turning over Guelph. The same sky I've watched from this driveway for more than 30 years. It doesn't look any different than it did before all of this started. But I look at it differently. A man can spend a lifetime being the one who keeps the peace. The trouble with keeping that kind of peace is that eventually you notice it isn't peace at all. It's just silence with a polite name on it. And silence, it turns out, is not the same thing as being fine. The chest will be beautiful when it's finished. Some things just need someone patient enough to do them right.